Hey everyone, welcome back to Giving the Game Away. Today we're going to talk about a timely topic, which is the death of the IDFA.
Yeah. How are you, Sam?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Good. This is, I've been seeing a lot of people talking about the IDFA recently. I'm sure you have as well. You're more involved in this topic of conversation than I am. It's just blowing my mind that it's all happening now when we've known about this for like a year. It's absolutely crazy. But yeah, I thought it would be good for us to talk about it and put our voices into this conversation because I think as a company, we have a slightly unique perspective. We really care about non-intrusive advertising and, pro-consumer advertising. And this is, I believe, a very pro-consumer move. I imagine you agree.
Yeah, I think there's some components of that when it comes to what the result is, but at the same time, it could also hurt the consumer because we're talking about a decision that Apple has made kind of unilaterally without having consulted with the community of developers that are making a living generally using advertising, and their revenue stream is now at risk because without the ability to measure attribution, the revenue is certainly going to drop. And as a result of that, making it harder for advertisers to track attribution and to measure success, there's a possibility that they will invest more of their money in the channels that are actually working well for them, which are the walled gardens of Google and Facebook. So it is in the concept something that certainly is good for the user, but at the same time, there's a lot of ripple effects, secondary effect of that will really affect the way that most publishers are making a living. And I think a lot of people don't really see how that's really going to affect their day-to-day, right? A lot of users rely on advertising as well to have free content, and if this content cannot be monetized in the same way, this might also create a change for them. So I think overall this is a big thing. This is a big shift, and I don't think that anyone really is able to measure the consequence of what is going to happen. And certainly the the motivation that Apple has behind this change is not exactly as noble as what their marketing suggests.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's like a billion topics you've uncovered that I want to dig into. I'm curious about what do you think Apple's primary motivation is? Because to me, who's more of an outsider on the topic, it does feel like it feels like a good marketing headline because it is, it's pro-privacy. Do you think? Yeah, I guess what's the nuance of that from their perspective, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean that's Apple's always been on the side of the consumer from a marketing standpoint, being very vocal about being against other platforms that monetize user data. So that's certainly the position. I think in reality, it was really aimed at hurting Facebook. There's actually a great podcast, the Mobile Dev Memo, that covers this topic specifically. But Apple lost control over the App Store when it comes to distribution of apps. Most apps now are discovered by adverts into other apps or adverts that are on Facebook or Instagram. This is how people discover new apps. And then you end up going to the App Store, you download it there, but a lot of the traffic and a lot of the decision making is dictated by the ads that people are seeing, not by the creation that Apple is putting in the App Store. And that's very different from what it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when being featured on the App Store was a really big deal. And of course it still is, but a lot of the discovery is done by advertising, and Apple doesn't really control that. And so that's partially one of the reasons why they wanted to do that, to weaken the position of Facebook, that is acting as a big acquisition channel for them, and be able to control more closely which games are actually doing well on the platform. And of course, Apple, Facebook, Google, all of those guys, they have different business models, but at the end of the day, they are the biggest companies in the world, and they all compete against each other. So anything that they can do that increases their value at the expense of another one is worth doing. And we know that there's been a bit of a rivalry between the two companies. So I would certainly think that those those measures have clearly been put in place from a competitive standpoint.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've been one of the major parts of this I have been tracking is Facebook's response to it. Obviously, they've been really anti iOS 14 because of it, and taking out full page ads and stuff like that. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, insiders from Facebook were talking about it, and they were saying that it's Facebook obviously know that they can't change Apple's minds, but by opposing it so publicly, it's a great PR move, because Facebook's stance in this whole thing is very much on the side of, for example, the developers or small businesses. They're saying that the small businesses are going to suffer from this, and that makes Facebook look really good because they're protecting those people. And obviously, that is still competition. It's still trying to bring someone else, the other company, down through your own perspective. It's really interesting. I obviously, yeah, I find it really interesting.
I think I'm not sure if it comes out as very credible. The way that they say that, it's clear that their business is going to be massively affected. Every download, every click, every link, normally was the attribution was the core of what made Facebook successful. When if you're a brand or an agency, Facebook would tell you 70% of your leads are coming from Facebook. It was this clear measurement, this last click attribution, that really made the value of Facebook, because brands could really see the effect of putting dollars into Facebook, and Google is obviously doing the same thing. And now with that removed, it's really their core strength that is suddenly killed, because you can't track users across different games. And so I've actually seen a deck from Facebook, I'm not sure which department, it wasn't a global thing, where they were kind of going back on that and showing that actually brand awareness can also provide huge benefits, and the click actually doesn't always convert or create a returning customer. So it was really crazy to see that the thing that they've said for 12 years, what they've sold to the markets, now they are going back on it purely because they won't be able to do it. So I don't know, there's some of this behavior is clearly reactive to the news and not really something that they really believe. And I think a lot of people can see through that, can see how bad this is going to be for them. But they're not going to be the most affected. They're a massive company, they have login data. The main problem are for the independents, the companies who do not have login data and did actually require this IDFA to be the unique identifier. So Facebook's going to be fine, but they're just putting up a fight for the sake of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course. I mean, this whole thing is sort of happening at the same time as Google deprecating cookies as well. And Google is going to be fine through that. It's a pro-consumer. It's an apparently pro-consumer move that's going to affect a lot of people. I found an interesting statistic sort of surrounding that, saying that 88% of cookie data is lost, which means your upper funnel activity is like constantly underreported by about 41%. I don't know if that's something that is happening with IDFA as well. Do you think that's because IDFA is creating so much data? Do you think all of it is actually necessary? It's all. I mean,
certainly it's certainly been abused, and that's why the move is actually a good thing, right? What you can do with the IDFA is literally track users across multiple apps and really understand what they are consuming, when they're consuming it. It's more information than the user probably have about themselves. It's a digital signature of the user. So and it's been used in different ways. You can buy IDFAs to target. So it's been abused, of course, and this is not it's actually a good thing that it's going away. I think the way that yeah, Apple has brought that up, means that there are also ulterior motives. But yeah, overall, I think it's going to be beneficial for the customer in the long term. It's always the same question as well. It's, you know, Apple says it's bad for the consumer. Does the consumer really care? It's like, you know, the GDPR consent here in Europe. Personally, I think it's more of an annoyance to have to click, you know, consent on all these websites, and you have 5 pop-ups, and you have to. I just want to get to the content, and I think it's kind of a similar thing where this is a fight that the average person is not really fighting. So using that as a, you know, as main argument to put up this fight is always quite funny to me, because the average consumer is probably reading and, you know, saying, what's the IDFA? So
yeah, I think they all probably are. In a way, like that made me think of browsing the internet in the modern world, and it's hell. Like there's pop-ups everywhere. There's intrusive advertising everywhere, and the GDPR thing, though I haven't thought about it, as it is essentially another pop-up. It's another contributing factor to a more difficult user experience. And I suppose it's just another thing for mobile gaming, which is currently in a relatively intrusive place, which is something we're trying to fix as a company. Yeah, I just found that interesting, that I had never thought of GDPR as another thing that you've got to get through in order to get to content.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
When you see all these companies fighting against, you know, data and fighting for the consumer. But, you know, this is why we see ourselves as doing the same thing, but fighting from a user experience point of view, which might not make compromise your data or put you at any risk. Not that the IDFA does that anyway. I mean, what is the biggest risk that can happen is not, you know, you're not at risk of death or anything like that. But no one's really looking at the UX point of view, maybe because it's not as quantifiable, and it's maybe something that people don't think is that bad. But actually, if you ask anyone, that is the main thing. They don't like to be interrupted. They just want to go do whatever they wanted to do. And what's happening in the back end about their data, you know, if it's free, well, you know, a lot of them are okay with this value exchange. So not saying that, you know, they are not dodgy companies and that everything is okay, but I think overall the fight that is being fought and the real customer problem are very much disjointed.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I want to bring it back into like really specifically gaming for a second, because you mentioned the sort of short-term impacts of IDFA, low revenue, brands possibly being more hesitant to enter mobile for a little while because of the lesser tracking capabilities. Do you think more games are going to become premium to try and offset that revenue here?
Well, I think that would be a mistake, because again, you know, people's willingness to pay for things is not going to change, right? And we know that most people are not willing to pay on mobile. But that's another reason why maybe Apple thinks that publishers will less be able to rely on advertising revenue, and therefore have to put more in-app purchase, on which Apple gets 15% or 30%, whereas they end up getting anything out of advertising revenue. So I am sure that this is part of the plan, of the grand plan that Apple has in place. You know, more what Apple would call a business model that users control. You can buy things or you don't, but at least it's your decision. So I think that's probably their goal. I don't think that this will actually translate into anything, because it's not about, you know, it's not about changing the business model. It's about people's willingness to pay for things. And I don't think people would be willing to pay $1 for a hyper casual game. I mean, it's a big difference between 0 and 0.1, right? It's either it's free or it's not. So yeah, I don't think that would translate into significant revenue for the industry.
Okay. Yeah, that's totally fair. I've heard interesting theories, or just theory crafting, that I don't think is ever possible. But I heard people talking about a mini walled garden approach to all this whole thing, like brands creating smaller platforms within the App Store where cross-tracking is easier to do. Like imagine Voodoo creating an app for all of their games which is essentially a library of everything they published. And it's easy to cross-promote their work and track users across those games, kind of like an ecosystem similar to Fortnite or Sony. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, because obviously I'm not sure it's even possible based on the Apple terms of service, but it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think the Play Store does allow apps to be stores. So you can download an app. It's actually a store you can download from there, or at least it was possible before. I don't think Apple, no, I don't think they allow that. There used to be apps back in the day. One of them was called App Gratis. It was pretty big in France. Like every day they would feature an app that was the paid app, and they would make it available for free. To be featured there, you had to pay this website like 50 grand a day or something to be featured, and it was a perfect way to get featured, get some good exposure. And Apple banned them from one day to another without any notice, because pretty much the same thing. They felt that this was skewing their control of the App Store, because they could decide what's going to be popular tomorrow, and then they removed them. So I think this store idea, I mean, not in the way that I had it in mind is literally you download an app and then you have access to all the games. I don't think this is something that Apple allows, but there might be a way to, have some kind of login system across a specific publisher or a bunch of games, and that is totally allowed if you are not, as long as you are respecting the consent of the users. So there might be some micro markets forming. Admix, we certainly aim to have, eventually our own identifier across the different games. That's absolutely true. But yeah, that's going to be interesting to see if anyone can compete with the scale of the bigger networks.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how people respond to this. I mean, obviously we've spoken about IDFA in the past, and we've always had a relatively, compared to everyone else, optimistic view of the changes that are going to happen. I guess to sort of close off the conversation, it'll be good to hear some of your long-term theories for how it will impact the industry as a whole, brands, and especially in play.
Yeah, I think the long-term strategy is that as long as you have first-party data and you have first-party attribution and you have your own ecosystem, these are the players who are going to win, right? Because the IDFA is really about matching users across different properties. And so if you rely on another partner to measure attribution, or if you rely on a DMP because you don't have much data about your users, that you're going to be in trouble. So if you're a middleman in the chain, you're going to be in trouble because you had to connect to all of these partners. In our case, Admix, we are basically rebuilding a complete marketplace. What Google has done on the web, or DoubleClick in the past, or you can look at it as Facebook, their own ecosystem in social media. We are building all of the pieces to have the same in gaming. We have SDK, we have an ad server, we have an SSP, we're building our own DSP. So we have the entire thing. And within the game, we can capture gameplay behavioral data, which will help us predict age, gender, and other things as well. So because of that, the IDFA for us, it's less important. It's something that advertisers might want to target against to make sure that they're not serving an ad to an existing customer, for example. But there will be other ways to do that in the future, and we'll have a way to predict, targeting data based on our own data without relying on third parties. Yeah, that's basically a global statement, right? Anyone having their own data will be emerging as a winner. If you have a login system, basically you've already won, whereas all the others are going to suffer. So it's going to be a good way to clean up the ecosystem.
Interesting. And do you think, how do you think brands will feel in the long term? I mean, I imagine brands might be a bit more cautious in the short term because of lack of tracking, but ultimately this will encourage more high funnel brand advertising.
That's possible. Yeah, I think brand is going to become more important because of that. I also think that if brands do not have an option anymore, if there's no IDFA period, they will have to find other ways to target. They will have to find other ways to measure attribution. They're not going to stop advertising, right? This
Yeah.
doesn't happen. There are eyeballs. The eyeballs would be reached for sure. It's just going to be a different way, a different normal. And yeah, I think overall, I mean, this is really oversimplifying, but I think at the end of the day, the brands will keep trying to reach their audience, and the solutions that have adapted will be the one that they will adopt. At the end of the day, the buyers are only looking at what is the channel that works best, right? And so that's what they're going to continue to do. And if Facebook works better than anyone, that money is going to go there. If it's not, it's going to go somewhere else. So yeah, that's it's whoever drives the best performance will, of course, end up getting the spend.
That is a very appropriate message for a COVID world. It's just a new normal that's coming. It's fine.
There's so many different things happening at the same time, and yeah, IDFA is something that is hiding in plain sight. And as you said, it's been proposed for a long time, and there's more and more people starting to freak out in terms of like what are going to be the effects. This is a fundamental shift in the world of advertising for sure, and the internet as a whole. Every time this revolution happens, there are a lot of companies who get hurt, but there's also opportunities that come as a result of that. And yeah, if you play it right, you can end up being on the right side of things.
Interesting. Cool. Well, I am very excited to see how these changes play out in reality, because it's all theory crafting right now. Yeah.
iOS 14 is already out there. If you have it, you already see the pop-up. So it's a bit more than theory, but yeah, we'll see when it's be rolled out. It's any week, any month now. So it's going to be an exciting next quarter for sure.
Wow. Yeah, this fascinating conversation. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Awesome. Really Thanks, Ian. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you next week in another episode.